Let me tell you a little story I discussed on Levin TV the other day. My wife and I were at a wedding in Chicago. And we had an Uber driver bringing us back to Chicago O'Hare. We stayed at a wonderful old hotel called the Drake Hotel. We had attended a wonderful wedding. Not ours, we're already married. And the gentleman was an older African-American. And we just got to talking. His father had recently passed away. His father was 95. He was 68. I'm almost 61. He's driving an Uber. And I said, "Why do you drive an Uber?" He said, "I retired when I was 65. I worked at a ball bearing factory for, I think he said, 37 years. And I believe the town was Evanston, Illinois, but I could be wrong. Somewhere outside of Chicago, about 30 miles. But he was born in Chicago. His father was born in Chicago. That's where he raised, and that's where he was staying. And by the way, Chicago's a beautiful city. There are dangerous parts, deadly parts, but that's the same with most cities. But the center of the city, and I didn't get to see much of it, near the waterfront, absolutely beautiful. And we didn't discuss politics. We discussed life. And we got quite friendly. We were stuck in traffic. It took us about an hour to travel, I don't know, 10 miles? And he showed me on his iPhone, I believe it was, a video of him and his 1.5-year-old grandson. And he's teaching his 1.5-year-old grandson to read. It's beautiful. And he says to me, there's a real world out here. And he says, and I drive this car, and I've been doing this now 3 years as an Uber driver. And I meet many, many different types of people. All races, religions. And he said, the truth is, most of us get along just great. We get along great. We want the same thing. We want to be happy. We want a good job. We want to put food on the table. We want to take a trip every now and then. We want to have a decent retirement. We don't hate each other. We're not at each other's throats. It's a big country. And the vast majority of us get along just fine. And we want to get along. Do you get the sense, ladies and gentlemen, when you watch television news or these 24/7 cable channels, that that's what they want? That they want us to get along? Do you get the sense that they know what's actually going on out there in the world? Do you know the vast majority of the American people don't give a damn about Omarosa or her book or what's in her book or what anybody has to say about her book? Or Stormy Daniels? Stormy Daniels, think about this. Somebody's daughter who goes into pornography. And she becomes a regular featured news focus. And her lawyer, same thing. Day after day, week after week, month after month. You never heard of her before. Most of us find what she does to be utterly grotesque, that she could well have been a victim and brought into that industry. And the media exploit her. The media are exploiting Omarosa, who obviously is not well, has certain emotional and other types of issues, isn't exactly the greatest truth teller, but the media exploit her. Why? Because they justified to themselves that by pushing Omarosa, pushing what she wrote, pushing Stormy Daniels, pushing whatever they need to push out there in the public square to the exclusion of so much else, that they will advance their ideological agenda. That's not the purpose of a free press. That's not the purpose of a free press. It can occur, obviously, under the First Amendment. You're free to write what you want, unless you violate various defamation laws and so forth. But I'm not talking about that. I'm excluding that. You're fair to say whatever you want, write pretty much whatever you want, right? Freedom of the press has nothing to do with the freedom of an individual to smear somebody. It is a concept that, when put into action, has as its purpose to sustain and improve the civil society, and in our case, the republic. One of the reasons why CNN in particular, Stelter, Tapper, and the rest are constantly attacking Fox is because Fox doesn't go along with all the rest. Some individuals on Fox do, and they're specifically called out by the other media and given praise. But because Fox doesn't buckle, you can agree with Fox personalities or not, that's not the point. But because Fox is not CNN, Fox is not MSNBC, Fox is not the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so forth, it's an outlier. It is unacceptable to the groupthink that pervades so-called newsrooms. The mentality, especially since Watergate, especially since Woodward and Bernstein and the Washington Post, is we get to decide what the news is. We here in the newsroom. We get to decide what's newsworthy. We will decide what's newsworthy. And anybody who disagrees with us is to be slammed in one form or another. You can see the Republicans and former Republican consultants, the John McCain or this one and that one, who are now at MSNBC, Nicole Wallace, you can see others, Steve Schmidt. They understand how it's played. You want to be praised, you want to make money through the media and other sources. You got to join the mob. And you know what? It's a lot more fun because you can claim to support free press and to be on the side of truth and compassion while you're spreading pseudo-events and propaganda. So, let me continue here. At first, it may seem strange, Forston wrote, that the rise of pseudo-events has coincided with the growth of the professional ethic, which obliges newsmen to omit editorializing and personal judgments from their news accounts. But now it is in the making of pseudo-events that newsmen find ample scope for their individuality and creative imagination. And that sums it up, because that is what they claim to be the free press. They claim to be defending the free press, but that's not it at all. They're claiming their own individual and creative imaginations. That's what they're defending. In a democratic society like ours, and more especially in a highly literate, wealthy, competitive, and technologically advanced society, the people can be flooded by pseudo-events. For us, freedom of speech and of the press and of broadcasting includes freedom to create pseudo-events. And you see, folks, that's what they want the freedom to do. Create pseudo-events. Not defending freedom of the press. Freedom of the press isn't under danger in this country. Competing politicians, competing newsmen, and competing news media contest in this creation. They vie with one another in offering attractive, so-called informative accounts and images of the world. They are free to speculate on the facts, to bring new facts into being, to demand answers to their own contrived questions. Our free marketplace of ideas is a place where people are confronted by competing pseudo-events and are allowed to judge among them. When we speak of informing the people, this is what we really mean. This is what we really mean. So the American citizen lives in a world where fantasy is more real than reality. That is, the world of the media, where the image has more dignity than its original. Now, as I pointed out a couple of months ago, here are what Borston says are some of the characteristics of pseudo-events which make them overshadow spontaneous events. Pseudo-events are more dramatic. A television debate between candidates can be planned to be more suspenseful. For example, by reserving questions which are then popped suddenly, then a casual encounter or consecutive formal speeches planned by each separately. So when Megyn Kelly, right out of the box, went after Donald Trump with the Rosie O'Donnell question, that was a pseudo-event. That was an event intended to create drama, and that's exactly what it did. It was discussed for weeks afterwards and had an incredible impact on future debates and on the Trump candidacy, painting him in a corner. Pseudo-events being planned for dissemination are easier to disseminate and to make vivid. Participants are selected for their newsworthy and dramatic interest. So you see a lot of these people who are on, for instance, CNN or MSNBC, they bring them in because they're provocative, because they're outrageous, because they are radicals, because they will say things that will draw an audience, like a carnival barker or a car accident. Pseudo-events can be repeated at will, and thus their impression can be reinforced. You're going through that right now with Omarosa and her book and the claims that Trump's reaction, as a result, demonstrates that he's racist. So the whole thing is phony from beginning to end. And yet that's exactly where we are. And tell me, how does this help a republic? How does this help a culture? How does this help a society? And that's the point of a free press, you know. Pseudo-events being planned for intelligibility are more intelligible and hence more reassuring. Even if we cannot discuss intelligently the qualifications of the candidates or the complicated issues, we can at least judge the effectiveness of a television performance. How comforting to have some political matter we can grasp. Pseudo-events. Knowledge of pseudo-events, of what has been reported or what has been staged and how, becomes the test of being informed, supposedly. News magazines provide us regularly with quiz questions concerning not what has happened, but concerning names in the news, what has been reported in the news magazines. Pseudo-events begin to provide that common discourse, so-called, which some of my old-fashioned friends have hoped to find in the great books. And pseudo-events spawn other pseudo-events in geometric progression. They dominate our consciousness simply because there are more of them, and ever more of them, and a never-ending list of them. Tempted like no generation before us to believe that we can fabricate our experience. Listen to this. Tempted like no generation before us to believe we can fabricate our experience. Our news, our celebrities, our adventures, and our art forms. We finally believe we can make the very yardstick by which all these are to be measured. That we can make our very ideals. This is the climax of our extravagant expectations. It is expressed in a universal shift in our American way of speaking, from talk about ideals to talk about images. And the biggest chunk that's missing from this book is this is all the creation of, established by, given birth from, progressivism. The very same things Professor Daniel Borston, the late Professor Daniel Borston, writes about in his book, The Image, can be said about academia. Pseudo-history. Pseudo-education, indoctrination, unreality, on top of unreality. Because this is what progressivism does. Same thing can be said about how progressives approach governance, economics. Unreality, pseudo-arguments about economics, about health care, about immigration, Arguments they know to be false. Arguments they know to be wrong, but it's of no consequence. They make them anyway, and they repeat them. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.